Hello again. For this video we're going to be taking a look at another very popular and useful nymph, which is called a pheasant tail nymph. You can see here that it's, if I put up this one here, there are two really common variants of this. You can see the one here that's in the vise actually has fibers coming out the top and side, which act as sort of legs for the fly. And another really common variant is one tied without any kind of front side legs. They're both very effective. You may choose one or the other depending on on different situations or the kind of water that you're fishing in. But like I said, they're both very common and very simple to tie. They have almost they're a fly with one of the fewest amounts of materials you need. So really, for this, you only need 3 different materials. So I'm just going to pop this out, and I'll put in the hook that we're going to be using. They're commonly tied in, probably the largest size that would be common would be a size 10 hook, and they get down to as small as size 20. Now, very commonly they're tied on a straight shank nymph hook, but there's no reason why, I'm not sure how well that shows up, you can't tie it on a curved shank nymph or scud hook like this one as well. For today, the demonstration, I'm just going to tie it on a straight shank nymph hook. This one here happens to be a size 12, and we'll just get going with that. So for the thread, because they're typically fairly small flies, you can typically use 8/0 or even sometimes smaller thread. I'm using an 8/0 red thread. It helps for your visibility, but it also helps with a little hot spot at the front at the end of the fly. So for this one, we're going to start at the tail, and we are going to, or at the back of the fly here, I'm just going to put on, attach the thread, break it or cut it off, put down a little bit. And the first material that we're going to need is just small gold, copper, or red wire. Okay, now the size of wire that you use, make sure that it matches your hook size. The smaller the hook, the finer the wire. So just for simplicity, I'm going to take off, probably 6 inches or so, 2-3 wraps off the spool, something like that. And then in the very deepest part of the V of my scissors, I'm going to just snip it off. I like to attach the wire first. It's not a necessity. Some people will put it on second. I find it just a little easier if I do it first. So I'm going to put it on, and I'm going to attach it to my side of the hook shank. So I'll just lay it underneath the hook, between the thread and the hook, and start making a few wraps. And what will happen is that will basically spin up to my side of the hook, and I'll secure it down with wraps all the way to the front, and then all the way basically back to where the barb of the hook is. I don't want to go over the bend of the hook, as that'll start to, when I put my tail on, which is next, tail and body fibers, if I went too far back, like over the bend, it would force the fibers to be going down at an angle, and I don't want that. I want the fibers to come off straight from the back of the hook. So the next material we'll use is pheasant tail, and you want pheasant tail with some reasonably long fibers on it. So you're going to take a decent clump here, something like 12 different fibers. Pull them out at 90 degrees to the stem of the feather, and when you do that, you'll see that the tips all line up. And seeing as this end is going to be our tail, it's nice to have them all lined up and even. So having done that, you can either trim them off, or if you're feeling like it, you can just rip them off. I'd like to trim. And then I'm just, for ease of handling, I'm just going to trim off a little bit here just to even them up. Having done that, I'm going to gather the fibers together here so you can have a nice clump, and you can see that, for the most part, they're all the same length. And for the tail, it's going to stick out the back of the hook. I want it to be about 2/3 the length of the shank of the hook. So I'm going to line this up here, and you can see now that's a little too long. So I'm just going to take a little bit less, Yeah, and that's fairly reasonable. If it comes sort of to where the barb of the hook is, that's good. Move it back to where I want it, transfer my hands up, do a pinch wrap, pull it around, straight up, do 2 more or 3 more securing wraps, and then you can see you have your tail back there. These remaining fibers here are going to form the body of the fly, and so that's what's going to happen next. So what we need to do is we need to take our thread, move it up towards the front of the hook, towards the eye, but we don't want to go all the way to the eye. In this area right in here, we need to make a thorax, which will be a larger, bulbier kind of part. So we want to leave at least 2.5 eye widths back from the eye of the hook. And that's approximately where I am now. So I'm content with that. I'll just mark it off there. If you want, you could throw in a 1/2 inch just to secure your thread there so you know it's not going to move around and jump around. And now the next thing is, and you can either do this just with your hands, or if you want you could use a hackle plier. We're going to take this bundle of fibers, of pheasant tail, and we're going to wrap it around the hook up to where our thread stopped. Now fibers like this tend to want to separate, so it's not bad to give them just a little twist. And what you can do is you can go halfway down, take your forefinger from your other finger, hold it in place so it's not going to unwind on you, go around, and make sure that you cover up the thread wraps and avoid your hook, because it will do exactly what happened right there, which is unravel your fibers from the bundle. Okay, come back up, pinch it down, and then just making sure that that stays tight to the hook shank. You don't want this loose on the hook shank. Make spiraling wraps up to where your thread stopped, and make sure you get all the fibers every time. Okay, and if you go one wrap a little past, that will not hurt the fly. So now you've got it to where you want it. You take your thread back over it towards the rear. Okay, got 1 thread wrap, 2, 3, that will secure it. Okay, now what you can do is trim off all this excess here. I like to lift it up straight, come in and trim it off at an angle, and then I'm just going to take a few thread wraps to bind that down and make it look neat, so there's not sort of loose fibers all over the place. Okay, now I'll take my thread back up. Next is to take the wire, and we're going to counter wrap it. So we were wrapping away over the top from me, and so with the pheasant tail, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go under and away from me for these. I'll do 1 wrap right at the base to secure it, and then make spiraling wraps to where the pheasant tail ended. And you try to get these as evenly spaced and in a consistent a spiral as you can. Once you get here, you can just bring your thread up over and behind it, do 2 or 3 wraps to catch the wire. Of course, don't break your thread like I just did. Seems every time I do one of these demos I break a thread. But like I've always said, it's not something to panic about. When you're dealing with wire, it's not unusual for thread to be cut. You can get sharp edges, and obviously the wire is stronger than the thread, so if you're over pressuring like I was in that situation, you will have a tendency to snap your thread. So just put it back on, cover up that loose part that was not tied in tight, and then we're going to come in with the wire, pinch it right down close, and just do really tight turns and helicopter, and it'll snap. There we are. Okay, and that will break your wire off very, very close to the thread wraps and won't leave, shouldn't leave anyways, protruding sharp point. The next material that we're going to use is once again some more pheasant tail, which I just dropped. So we'll take another clump of fibers, okay, again in that same 10-12 range of fibers. We're going to straighten them out like I did before, take them off 90 degrees to the stem so the points line up nicely. Excuse me, and trim them off. Okay, so again, once you've done that, you'll see that the points are nicely lined up. And this clump of fibers is going to do two things. It's going to form the back casing or the wing case of the thorax, and then the tips of these are actually going to form the legs that we saw sticking out in the one version of the fly. So to do that, we need to have fairly accurate measurements. We've got about a third of the hook left here, and so we need at least that much to be able to double back. So what we're going to do is from the eye, we're going to measure back to at least the bend of the hook and maybe just a little bit beyond. Okay, and then we're going to take that point and put it in right at the back of our thread points, which will be our tie-in point. So just do loose wrap to catch it, a couple of secure wraps to put it down. Make sure that it's on top of the shank of the hook. That's where we need it to be. Okay, and then you can basically wrap down, trim off this excess here, and then wrap it down to secure it. We won't need these parts. Take a few wraps to secure that to the shank of the hook. And come back up to the same place, and we're going to get here our last material, which is in the traditional version peacock herl. For a size 12, probably 2 herls will be enough. If you want, you can choose 3 to make it a little bit more bulky, but I've already got a bit of a bulk right there for my thread wraps and such, so 2 should probably be enough. Unfortunately, I took 3. And tips of peacock herl are typically very brittle, so you don't want to use the end of the fibers that were attached to the feather, which you can tell from this white part at the end. You want the other end, and you're going to trim off a chunk of that, maybe even up to an inch long, 2.5 centimeters, which of the tip, which will be brittle. We're going to lay this on and secure it to the hook. Wrap towards the eye and stop there. Remember not to crowd the eye with your thread. You need to leave space, otherwise you'll run out of space for tying off your materials. So we've got our thread here attached and secured. We've got our peacock herl. We're now just going to wrap this peacock herl towards the eye, making a nice fully covered thorax area. You can see how the peacock herl likes to come apart. That's very common with fibers like this. Don't worry about it. Once you've got what you think is a nice shape to it, secure it with your thread by going behind. 3 wraps will secure it. Pull it gently tight. Have those herls to the top so your thread's hanging down where it's safe, and snip it off. Now, the final 2 stages here are to finish with the wing case and the legs. So these fibers, pheasant tail fibers that we put in, we're going to lift them straight up. Okay, make sure you get all of them, and none of the tail. You're going to lay them over the top of the fly, okay, which will form the wing case, and pinch it right at the eye, and do your a loose wrap. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but you can see here as I tied this, the fibers have wanted to go to the bottom side of the hook. I don't want that, so I'm just going to ask them nicely by pinching them and bringing them up to the top of the hook to be on top. Okay, remember that you're in control of the materials. You tell it what to do, and don't let it tell you what to do. Put on another wrap or two, reorganize that, tighten it a little, and now you can see you have a nice wing case on the top, over top of the peacock girl. Now we need to take this clump that's sticking out forward and turn them into legs. And the way we do that, and I'm just going to put in a half hitch here just to secure my thread. Whoops, I don't need it slipping off on me. Never mind. What you'll do is you'll come in with your thumbnail, okay, and you're going to put it on the eye of the hook and force those fibers back up and towards the back of the hook. Okay, and you can see how now they're lifting up. You can do that a few times. And you're basically trying to put just a little crease in them, so you can kind of pinch them with your fingernail or your thumbnail. Now you can see how they're vertical. When they're at this point, what you want to do is basically divide that vertical clump into two pieces, so that half go on each side, half of the fibers go on each side of the fly. It doesn't have to be perfectly exact, just do your best to get fairly equal amounts of fibers, convinced that they should be on each side of the fly. So you just do that by gently pulling some of them one way, pulling some of them the other way, so you end up with a bit of a split. Now what you do is you'll come in with your other hand, you're going to come in vertically, and you're just going to push them down, pinch them, and move them to the back. And once you've done that a few times, you can take 1, 2, maybe 3 wraps of thread to secure them in that direction. And if they've moved around on you, just keep re-encouraging them to go where you need them to go. Okay. If there's a few that are stragglers and kind of hanging out in all the wrong places, don't worry about them. You can trim them off at the end. Once you've done that, you can go in and secure that off with a small head, and then finish off your fly with a series of half hitches, or if you know how to do it, a whip finish. Of course, if you have a whip finish tool and you know how to use that, you can certainly go ahead and use that. You break or cut off your thread, and then just go in and find anything that's sort of loose and straggly, heading in the wrong direction, and just give it a quick trim. If there's a couple that are sticking out the top, you can nip them off, and essentially you'll end up with the fly that has 2 sides on it, legs on 2 sides. The final thing you can do, just to add some strength, is to put a little bit of head cement over top of the wing case and onto the threads to make it stronger and more more secure. So I'm just going to take this Loon UV glue, put it over the top, and then I'll set it with my UV light. Takes a few seconds, and there you are. As simple as that, you've got one finished pheasant tail nymph. These are excellent for pretty much any species of trout, and of course for other species such as panfish or perch, they work very, very well as well. So there you are, your pheasant tail nymph.